Hello and welcome to Off Chain. My name is Jimmy Song, and I will be your host for this evening. We got a lot of stuff to cover. I apologize for sort of not having a show last week. I was in Santa Monica attending BlockCon. I also did my seminar, Programming Blockchain. Had a lot of really good students there. If any of you were watching, hi. Let me give you some updates. As far as the Blockstream satellite goes, I did manage to get this nice laptop from Dell. It's an XPS 13, and I got it kind of refurbished. But one of the nice things about it is that it supports like all sorts of Linux things. So you can see that I have Ubuntu on here, and almost all of the I think all of the components are available to be, they work with, oh, whoops, my camera's wrong. And all right, that's better. They work with, Linux kind of natively, and that was why I wanted to get this. I wanted to make sure that this satellite would work with everything. I managed to install Fiber and GNU Radio and the two other libraries. All I have to do now is to hook up the satellite and get all the software running and stuff. But the installation is done. I have a Linux laptop. I can do a bunch of other things related to it. I also decided for some reason to utilize Vim so I can learn it. I've been an Emacs user for like 20 years. And I want to see how we do with Vim. So anyway, that's my Blockstream satellite update. So I wanted to talk a little bit about like the growing developer deficit. I have an article coming out. Hopefully it'll be on CoinDesk tomorrow. I wanted to reach a lot of people. But one of the things that I'm very passionate about is Bitcoin, obviously, and making sound money available to the world. But the thing that's sort of really missing out there is our developers. All these ecosystems are growing and growing and growing. Players are growing. They just can't. And the big thing that's sort of constraining their growth is the lack of developers. And I wanted to let you know, if you are a developer and you have some programming experience, there are two programs that I really want you to, I want to encourage you to get into, especially if you are sort of like Bitcoin curious or have some, application in mind that you'd like to build. There are two things. There's Dev++, which is happening the 2 days before Scaling Bitcoin. I will fully admit I am an instructor for this, and this will sort of view of the entire Bitcoin ecosystem and teach you sort of how to work with Bitcoin. The other thing is my seminar, Programming Blockchain. It's a 2-day seminar. I am doing it right before Dev++. This is going to be October 31st and November 1st at Stanford. But yeah, that's also another way. This will give you sort of more the why and sort of explain everything in detail and make you code your own Bitcoin library and send a testnet transaction built from scratch. I've had a lot of good feedback on it. All my former students are in a Telegram chat and on an email list. I send out opportunities and things on that list. So if you want to break into this industry, I highly, highly encourage you to do so, because not only is it lucrative, but it's also good for your Bitcoin investment if you have any. And certainly it'll position you very well going into the future as Bitcoin becomes a larger part of the world economy. And certainly, you want to get in on this stuff early. Well, this is your way to do it. You can do Dev++, you can do Programming Blockchain. I really want to encourage you guys. There's a lot of instructors for Dev++, by the way, including a bunch of core developers. Ethan Heilman and John Newberry have been core contributors in the past. John Newberry, I think, had the most commits in the last release, 0.15. So certainly a good person to learn from. There's a bunch of other instructors as well. And they'll go over all sorts of stuff, including sort of second layer solutions like Lightning and things. You can take a look at the full syllabus for those 2 days on the website that I have below in the video. You can click on it and take a look. I would also encourage you to go to Scaling Bitcoin. I mean, a lot of these conferences are very much into sort of ICO promotion, and you know, I was at BlockCon. I enjoyed BlockCon for the networking and things, but a lot of the presentations actually kind of felt like timeshare presentations, you know, like where, you know, you're like kind of stuck there and you don't really want to be there, and you know that they're going to sell stuff, and you know, they have all these like aspirational messages. What could you do if if we did X, Y, or Z? And it's like, you know, they're trying to sell you something. It's very hard to be at. Scaling Bitcoin is going to be very different. It's going to be sort of technical papers about Bitcoin, people presenting about sort of scaling solutions, right? This is why it's called Scaling Bitcoin. It's going to be very different than sort of a lot of the other conferences that you might, or I mean, let's face it, it's like more like altcoin and ICO conferences. And you know, that tends to sort of plague our space, and we sort of had to deal with it because those people are the ones that are willing to sort of sponsor a lot of these things. And you can sort of understand from a conference organizer point of view, if you want to make your money back, that's sort of how you do it. But you know, it can get a little tiresome. Scaling Bitcoin is very different. It's a lot like Breaking Bitcoin back in Paris, and you know, they have a great reputation. They've done this 3 times already, so I really want to encourage you to do that as well. All right, so I did that. All right, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin Gold. I did write that story just so you guys have an idea. That's the second most popular story that I've ever written, and largely it's because there just isn't that much information about it, and I'm getting sort of all the Google hits as a result of that. You know, I could see sort of like the refers coming in. It's like google.com, google.ca, google.uk, google.fr, Google, like every possible Google search, I guess, has my article as like the #1 result when you search Bitcoin Gold. So it's not a surprise that it's the second most popular ever. The first one was my article on Bitcoin Cash. So you know, whenever these hard forks come, it looks like my articles tend to do pretty well. Anyway, just to give you an idea, Bitcoin Gold is by the Lightning ASIC guy, Jack Liao, and he's sort of you know, he hired some developers, I guess, and they're doing most of the development for Mirai here in China, and they've had some problems sort of uploading to GitHub, so you might not see sort of the updates quite as fast. But their main thing is they're going to move to GPU and CPU mining, and they're doing this with Equihash. Equihash is sort of like this generalized birthday problem. If you don't know about the birthday problem, if you have, here's a very brief summary. If you have 23 people in the room, you have about a 50-50 chance of 2 people having the same birthday, and that's because the number of combinations of 2 increase very quickly. You know, it's like 23 times 11, 23 times 22 divided by 3 times 11. That ends up being like, I don't know, some number. Anyway, there are more combinations of pairs where you can possibly have the same birthday. And that grows and grows and grows. So by the time you get to like 46 people, and you know, you're almost certain to have 2 people with the same birthday, which is sort of an unintuitive result. And a lot of people have trouble grasping that. But anyway, that's sort of the basis for Equihash, and you know, a single hash needs to sort of collide, if you will, on some parameter. So it tends to be fairly slow. So you a CPU can calculate maybe like 8 to 10 hashes per second, versus you know, versus like Bitcoin SHA-256. Even a CPU gets like you know, many thousands, sometimes millions of hashes per second, which is a lot better. But one of the things about a generalized birthday problem is that you need a lot of RAM, and having a lot of RAM or requiring a lot of RAM kind of makes it ASIC resistant. I won't say ASIC proof, but ASIC resistant, because RAM costs a lot of money, and you need and the more RAM you have, the better it's going to be for calculating this sort of thing. So what you end up having is sort of like there is specialized equipment for Equihash, not in the least, because Zcash uses Equihash, and Zcash is very profitable. So what you end up having is Equihash that's used for Zcash, and there is specialized equipment, but it's only like 100 times more efficient than a CPU. So it'll do like 1,000 to like 3,000 hashes per second, as opposed to a CPU, which does like 8 to 10. And GPUs can do something like 80 to 100, something like that. So it's like it's only like 2 orders of magnitude better, and that doesn't give it sort of nearly the efficiency that you would get out of ASICs that you have in Bitcoin. So, for example, you know, an Antminer S9 does like 11 terahertz hashes per second. A CPU does like you know, mega hashes per second. So, you know, an ASIC, specialized ASIC for Bitcoin is 1,000,000 times better. So that's sort of the idea behind Bitcoin Gold. They do have a few things that give me a little bit of pause. Among others, the main thing is that they're planning something of a pre-mine. They say they're committed to a 21 million Bitcoin limit, but they are going to you know, take the 1% from somewhere. So I guess that's like 210,000 Bitcoin Gold tokens or something like that. And they have to sort of keep the history, or else it wouldn't really be a hard fork. So, I mean, the only place that I can think of that they're going to take that 210,000 Bitcoins from is future mining rewards. And, you know, there's still like 4 or 5 million to go. So they're really taking about 10% of the remaining mining reward ever, you know, going forward somehow. They can, I guess, take it in a lump sum or make it sort of like a slow bleed or something like that. But that's, you know, that's I think their plan is to take some sort of dev subsidy so they can continue development on it. I've never really liked the dev subsidy model, but I understand it because the developers need to get paid, and you know, the easiest way is to sort of do it like they're doing. I mean, that's not to say it's right, but I understand why they're doing it. Okay. Yeah. Somebody's pointing out it's one guy. Yeah, it kind of is one guy. It's hard to tell, right? Because it's one guy doing the commit on GitHub, but from what I'm told, it's actually a team in China, and they actually can't really get GitHub access from China for some reason. It might be the Great Chinese Firewall or something like that. So it's a little bit hard to tell how big their team is. I'm sure we'll find out more as we go on, especially if it's popular. But that's something to keep in mind. The other thing I want to talk about is SegWit2x. Obviously, there's a lot of consternation about replay protection in particular. I wrote an article about replay protection a couple weeks ago. You know, I even had Jeff Garza review it, make sure like I didn't have any technical inaccuracies or whatever. And the replay protection was based on spending a small amount to this special address, like it starts with 3 BIT. And basically, the redeem script is, or how you would redeem it is very clear to everybody because they published it. But you know, like if you did that on Bitcoin, it would go through. If you did it on Bitcoin 2x, it would not go through because they had special code in there that would reject those transactions at a consensus level. And you know, that's sort of what they chose because you know, if they had strong replay protection, they would basically cut off all of the that are in the ecosystem, and none of the wallets would be sort of compatible with Bitcoin 2x. And you know, I don't agree with them, but they think that 2x is sort of going to be the chain going forward. And if that's the case, why sort of alienate all the wallets? But that's sort of their thinking. And this is why they're not doing strong replay protection. But anyway, they came up with this way. I thought it was clever because basically it makes it so that every wallet can spend a small amount to that address, and you know, they don't have to like make any special stuff, except for certain wallets like Mycelium. I think they don't have the option to spend to multiple addresses in the same transaction. But pretty much everyone else, or most other wallets, have some option of spending a small amount to another address. And that was the idea. If you can spend a small amount to another address, then you would do it. Of course, that causes sort of problems on Bitcoin Core because you're bloating the blockchain with all these unnecessary UTXOs and stuff like that, which has a negative. But that said, a few days later, David Harding found this this flaw after a challenge from Peter Todd, who said, "Hey, there's a flaw in it. Can anyone find it?" He sort of like said it like an instructor, and David Harding, of course, he replied with an answer, and the answer involves basically payment channels. If doesn't know about the payment channel, and the settlement transaction spends a little bit to that address on Bitcoin 2x, then it's it can sort of get invalidated on 2x. So as a result of that flaw that David Harding published, Jeff Garzik decided to revert that opt-in replay protection, and now they have a new pull request on the SegWit2x repo, BTC1 as it's called, to have another opt-in replay protection scheme based on op return. So for a specific op return that's, I think, 4 or 5 characters, something like that. I can't remember. But it basically, if you have a transaction with an op return with this particular string, then 2x will just sort of ignore that transaction. It's an invalid transaction on 2x if you have an op return string that's very particular. I think it's like 2x no-go or something like that. So something that's kind of obvious what it is. Again, this is going to be that essentially amounts to every having to upgrade, because most wallets don't have op return functionality. You can't just sort of add that in. So this is going to cause some strife, and some a lot of wallets are just going to have to bite the bullet and like sort of have a checkbox or something that says add replay protection to this transaction. I am working on an article. I haven't really found a good way to explain it on sort of natural replay protection. And that involves sort of taking a UTXO that's only on one chain and sort of mixing it with yours. And I believe this to be the solution that will eventually emerge out of the 2x hard fork, is that somebody's going to have a faucet and that's based on a UTXO that's existing only on one chain, and just sort of most likely core, and just give away like a few Satoshis to each person. And what you would do is spend from that UTXO as a way to naturally protect yourself against replay attack, replay attack, and that is your core transactions won't automatically happen on the 2x side of the fork. And somebody may do the other side as well. I will say though that unlike Ethereum, which is sort of account based, replay isn't a problem on Bitcoin, because once you spend the UTXO on both sides and it's got different hashes, you're sort of good. And once you have a single UTXO that exists on one chain and not the other, you can sort of mix all your other coins. Of course, that reduces privacy and has all sorts of other things, and I don't know. It has a multitude of problems, but this is again sort of like the socialized cost of a hard fork that I should probably update my talk that I did at Breaking Bitcoin and sort of talk about that more later, maybe even on this show. Anyway, there's a lot of other things I wanted to talk about, but let's get to some of these questions that I got on my Twitter feed. I sort of roughly ordered them by number of likes and stuff like that. So Alex Crawl asks, optimal block size range and why? I'm paraphrasing his question, obviously. And I'm going to just say I don't know. I don't know what the optimal block size range is. The fee can't be 0, and I wrote this a while back. It can't be so large as to make the fee 0, because that means that every there's a socialized cost to storing every transaction, and it has to exist for perpetuity, right? Like as long as Bitcoin exists, that transaction has to be in the blockchain somewhere and has to be verifiable. And that's a cost that every node has to bear. And no one's really figured out a way to compensate those people for sort of storing that stuff. But if the cost is zero, then you can just sort of use the blockchain as data storage, kind of a slow data storage, but it's socializing too much cost, and the block can't be so big that the fee is always zero. But other limits, I have no idea. I mean, Luke Dash Jr.'s sort of gotten a lot of grief for saying, like a block size of 300K is enough. He might or might not be right. We don't really have enough data, and we don't know enough about this. It's a very new field, right? Like having to sort of have everyone sort of take of all of the different transactions, like storing the entire blockchain, and like the bandwidth requirements, and like sort of the CPU requirements for validating all that stuff. It's not entirely clear. I mean, other people have said, I think 8 megabytes you can probably handle right now. I don't know. Nobody really knows. That's sort of the point, which is why we need a lot more research, a lot more people to think about this stuff, and a lot more this stuff, frankly. And SegWit is a block size increase. I want to remind you of that again. And we will sort of slowly trend towards 2 megabyte blocks as SegWit becomes more and more popular. And if you want cheap fees, that's the best way to get them right now. Like move a lot of your UTXOs to SegWit addresses, and you'll see like you can get them in for like one Satoshi per byte. I mean, you can be down to like 20 cents for a transaction. It's no problem if you're using SegWit. And you can make it compatible by using sort of like the backwards compatible SegWit. I think very soon in the near future we're going to have like Bech32 addresses, and that'll make it even easier. So that's my answer for Alex. All right, let's take a look at the next question. Cal Cobb asks, if you're sort of a non-technical person and want to work on Bitcoin projects, how do I start? I mean, certainly sort of educating newbies about Bitcoin, especially the non-technical ones, and writing articles in that regard would be very useful. If you are, sort of, if you like video, you can make videos in that regard, and just sort of like show them what you're doing and how you do stuff, and get some advice from technical people, obviously, on making that stuff. But there's a lot of ways to contribute. The talk I gave at BlockCon was about sort of like the 3 anti-fragilities of Bitcoin. One was technical, one was economic, and one was social. I think we tend to overestimate the economic and underestimate the social. And there's an enormous social community that we need to make more anti-fragile. It's already anti-fragile, but sort of strengthening that and making it even more anti-fragile is a good way to invest. And that's just sort of putting the right information out there and making sure people understand different things, and bringing more people in that are educated on this stuff. That's, I think, how we get there. Should we prepare for hyper-Bitcoinization? That's a question from Seaside Crypto. Hyper-Bitcoinization, I can't believe that's like a phrase now. Daniel Krawisz, who I had on the show way back in episode 1, he actually wrote that article about hyper-Bitcoinization. I think he coined the term. So anyway, the idea is that at some point, fiat money is going to be seen as worthless. Bitcoin is going to be seen as sort of like the best store of value, and people are going to, there's going to be a tipping point at which point everyone's going to go into Bitcoin, and a lot more people are going to pull out. I still think that's some years away, and it'll happen more as sort of fiat money more and more devalued as governments get less and less disciplined. And spend more and more money. But that's going to take some time. But when it does, you're going to have to be very careful about the fact that you have Bitcoin. You're going to want more security around your stuff. You're going to, because when you're the one person that has a lot of money in like a crowd of people that don't, you just sort of have to be more careful. Security is going to be more paramount. But yeah, I mean, I can't predict what's going to happen. I mean, yeah, most of my answers, I think you'll find are I don't really know, but here's my speculation. So, why would anyone want Bitcoin Gold, Joe BTC? Well, I mean, the argument there is that you can sort of take miner centralization away from China, and you can have more people mining. It doesn't really take away much from sort of manufacturer concentration of mining equipment. I mean, we still know that Bitmain produces something like 70% of all mining equipment on Bitcoin. You know, like Bitfury does another 20%, and maybe Canaan does the rest, something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's not really that different for GPU manufacturing. I mean, you got NVIDIA and AMD. You know, what else is there really? I mean, those are the only two manufacturers. The real benefit, I guess, is that, you know, more people have access to GPU cards, and it's sort of you know, more diverse industry and stuff. I mean, that's sort of the argument. I mean, the dev subsidy, though, that really sort of on things and sort of takes away from their message quite a bit, in my opinion. But I mean, who knows? There may be people that are sort of inspired by that message. I mean, you know, we'll get to this later, but if you have certain scenarios in 2x, you might have a Bitcoin proof of work change. That's something to consider as well. All right, let's take a look at the next question. How will country-specific cryptos affect BTC? I assume, and that one is by Nathan Millen. I assume you're talking mostly about like the new crypto ruble that Russia is planning. And to be quite frank, I don't really know, but here's my speculation. Like I said, that's going to be my answer to most things. Yeah, I mean, if you have a crypto ruble, you may be able to do atomic swaps with Bitcoin. I don't know. I imagine that Russia is going to the crypto ruble, and I imagine many other central banks are going to go down this route. They're doing that because they can centrally control it, right? Like that. It may sound a lot like you know, a decentralized currency that Bitcoin is, but it's anything but, because you have, you know, the one entity sort of issuing tokens, and they can do whatever central bank monetary policy that they want. And really, you know, it's kind of a wet dream for a lot of central banks, because you're going to be able to track every transaction. You can tie it to identity if you want, or a social security number or whatever. You're going to eliminate cash transactions, so you can have negative interest rates. You could make people do all sorts of things, and you could track everybody and everything. It's like the antithesis of Bitcoin in many ways. So I mean, I wouldn't get too excited about the crypto ruble existing. I mean, maybe there's an application there, and that you can do atomic swaps with Bitcoin if they have sort of the requirements that you need in order to atomically swap against it. Certainly, exchanges will have an easier time, like you know, transferring money around, and as will all sorts of other institutions. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a great thing, and it'll be more of a competitor, like a fiat competitor. I mean, they can call it a cryptocurrency, but it's still fiat money. All right, I just want to thank the 372 viewers. Please give me a thumbs up and a subscribe to the World Crypto Network if you like this stuff and want more people to find it. You know, I'm enjoying these questions so far. I will go to the chat soon. All right, so let's take a look at the next question. Jackson Miller asks, what is the latest on Lightning? Well, I don't know if you saw, but Lightning Labs, led by Elizabeth Stark and Lalu and all those other guys, they released a client, you know, like a beta client that you can play with. I believe on testnet, maybe even on mainnet. I'm not entirely sure, but you can go play with it, download it, do whatever. It's going to take some time for Lightning to sort of come to fruition. Right now, it's mostly like small transactions, and they don't let you sort of put in, you know, payment channels that are bigger than a certain amount of Bitcoin to sort of to emphasize the fact that it's sort of beta software. And it's going to take some time. It'll require a lot of wallets to upgrade in order to support Lightning, but you will get much cheaper, faster transactions. I'm still not entirely convinced that medium of exchange is like that great a use case for Bitcoin. I think store of value is where it's at. But eventually, this may become a much bigger part of the ecosystem, and I certainly hope it does, because it'll make transferring money to exchanges or whatever much easier. All right, what's some tech that will help Bitcoin grow? This is from Crypto Cody. Yeah, that's a hard question. I mean, certainly. Having more bandwidth will help. Having more secure devices will help. The one thing that I've been talking about a lot are HSMs, hardware security modules. I think consumer level HSM would be great. If you don't know what an HSM is, it's been around a while. It's a hardware piece. It stands for hardware security module. And what it does is it has sort-sided. And it can sign things using that private key, depending on whatever algorithm you program into the HSM. Access to that private key is very restricted. And if you have sort of a FIPS 140-2 level 2 HSM, if somebody tries to tamper with it and get at that private key, it'll be evident what's going on. Of course, like having it tamper evident isn't that useful, but level 3 is tamper proof. So if somebody tries to get in there to get at the private key, if they open the machine or do anything, what the machine does is it will just sort of destroy the private key. There's like something in there that will just sort of destroy it and not make it possible for you to extract the private key from that machine. Now, this has been around a while. If you think about somebody like VeriSign, they sign tons of security certificates every day, and they use an HSM to sign the security certificate, so your website has that little green lock and stuff. That I think a consumer level HSM will have to come in at some point. Something that's easy to use, something that's cheaper. Right now, HSMs are really expensive because they're mostly selling to banks. Some of them are like ridiculously priced. It's like $50,000 just for the software inside it per year, and then the hardware is another like $10,000 or something like that. It's insane. But once you sort of bring it down to the consumer level, I think you can maybe put it on phones or something like that and make it impossible for people to go in and get it. And you'd be loading from your like cold storage or something like that, and like might not make it compromisable. I mean that's sort of the tech that we're looking at in the next 10 years or something. All right. How many chains will be meaningful in 10 years? This is from Ty Danko. That's a really good question. I believe Bitcoin to be one of them. Is there room for another one? That's really the question. I think so. I mean, there might be other use cases and stuff, and like altcoins and other things have a half-life, I think, of some undetermined amount right now. But people will lose interest. But 10 years is just sort of too short a time frame for most of them to disappear. I don't know if the natural sort of asymptotic point is like a single coin. I don't know. I honestly don't know what that is, especially with like sort of side chains and stuff coming up. I can see side chains sort of supplanting a lot of the need for altcoins. But then again, we might not. I don't know. It's really hard to tell at this point and hard to make that prediction. Go to this live chat questions. Tune and Dropout asks, Bitcoin briefly plunges nearly 9% on fears of greater oversight from U.S. regulators. Doesn't surprise me at all. Bitcoin tends to do this crazy dip and bounce and things. I'm convinced there's a lot of people sort of waiting to buy, and there's sort of like this latent demand, and they're just waiting for a little dip so they can like buy a ton. And this might be institutions, this might be individuals, this might be whoever. But if you saw an asset that you wanted to buy, like most people's mentality when it comes to buying is I'll wait for a dip and I'll buy. So when they see sort of a 9% drop, they're like, all right, instantly, let's go buy some. So I mean, like, yeah, it's hard to tell. And you know, Tone's a much better person to ask than me on this stuff. But my gut feeling is that there's still a lot of latent demand. There's yeah, I mean, Coinbase was saying they're getting like 100,000 signups or something crazy per month or something like that. And it's a lot of people that want Bitcoin, that are interested in Bitcoin, and all those people are probably waiting to buy, right? Honestly, and they want just a slight dip, so they feel like they have a discount. It's more sort of a human behavioral thing than anything else. Kind of what happens. All right, let's move on to some more questions from Twitter. All right, can you play devil's advocate? This is from Spencer Hansen. Yes, I can. I was interviewed recently about like Craig S. Wright and what I thought of him. All right, so I'll make the devil's advocate argument that he is not a scammer and that he's just sort of trying to better Bitcoin somehow. Maybe he lost the key or something like that, and he has the expertise. Maybe he's you know, he is an original cypherpunk, and he was Satoshi Nakamoto, and you know, he sort of created this. It's entirely possible given his history and you know where he was at the moment, and I think he's Australian, so the spelling and all that would make sense. Oh God, this I want to throw up. It's like physically nauseating to make that argument in some way. It's just, oh God, this guy. But yeah, I guess I could make that argument. It's a lot easier for me to make arguments on stuff where I'm more neutral, I guess, which everyone makes fun of me for. But yeah, I really think Craig's a scammer. Yeah. Anyway, let's take a look at another question. Why is there so much hatred for core devs? And who is Thamos? This is from Paul. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a lot of hate, but certainly there's a group of people that have wanted bigger blocks for a long time that core quite as much. Thamos is sort of the moderator for our Bitcoin and Bitcoin Talk. Which Bitcoin Talk is where like the 10,000 BTC transaction for pizza happened. It's where Satoshi was hanging out before he disappeared, and so, or he, she, or they disappeared. But that's kind of what Thamos is known for. Once he started sort of, you know, or censorship, depending on your point of view, on our Bitcoin and Bitcoin Talk. You know, with the advent of sort of bigger blocks and that debate, I think it was around 2015-ish. He got you know, he was like doxxed in many ways and stuff. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but yeah, I mean, he was a little bit heavy-handed, I would say, on a lot of the moderation and maybe what you might call censorship on our Bitcoin. I don't know if you can really call it censorship since it's sort of like a private thing. It's only like government that's. Whatever the case, that's who he is. And I don't think there's necessarily that much hatred for core devs. It's just mostly disagreement. And you know, people sort of say things sort of in a mean way on the internet. Anytime you actually meet any of these people, you know, I mean, there's no real hatred there. It's just sort of annoyance, disagreement. It's not. I mean, like real hatred is. I don't know, rather rare. We make it sound like it's a lot more common than it is. All right, Drew Fatler asks, what are some scenarios for 2x? Yeah, so I really want to do an article on this, and I certainly will when the time comes a little closer and it's clear that 2x is hard forking, and we're not really even sure if 2x will follow through with the hard fork. Certainly looks like they will, but who knows, right? It's a lot that can change in the next month. But yeah, so some scenarios, if 2x has majority hash rate, I can see, well, if the price on the Bitfinex futures is roughly correspondent to what it will be on like around November 18th or whenever that block they're supposed to fork at is sort of, I mean, at least 40% of miners sort of switch between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, and they just chase whatever's more profitable. I imagine those same 40% are a good estimation of who will switch back and forth based on what is profitable. We already have sort of F2 pool getting out of the 2x agreement, so they're certainly in that pool of 40%. So I imagine, if the price is, on Bitfinex futures is roughly accurate, and there's no indication that it isn't, and you have, sort of miners that will switch back and forth, I think Bitcoin will certainly have at least 40% hashing power. That's not to say that there aren't sort of other levers that the people on the 2x side can pull. It's certainly possible that they have something like 95% after the 2x hard fork, in which case core blocks will take like 20 times longer, which is like 200 minutes or 3.5 hours, something like that. Of course, it'll be really profitable for whoever is mining it. Well, it won't be until the difficulty adjustment, but I mean, that's something that people can live with, especially if you use it as store value. No one can steal anything, even if it gets attacked. The big thing is that there's this threat of attack, right? If you only have 5%, then it only takes 6% or 5.1% to attack your chain, and that's certainly something that the other side can do. The thing about sort of any sort of attack, it's an open declaration of war, and sort of from a social standpoint, that's kind of suicide for your social reputation. Like, no one's going to trust you anymore. All kinds of stuff like that. If you just sort of thought of Bitcoin sort of from a technical and economic standpoint, then what happened a while ago with like BitGo, where a customer lost like 75 Bitcoin or something like that because they accidentally put it into the mining fee. What happened with that scenario? Well, let me recap the scenario. There was a customer that tried to send himself some money, and it accidentally put like 75 Bitcoin into the transaction fee. And BitGo immediately said, we'll cover this, but let's try to work with the miner. The miner ended up like refunding the guy the 75 Bitcoins. Like that sort of scenario from just sort of a game theory, technical and economic perspective would never happen if you only considered the technical and economic perspective. The reason why that money was returned was because of the social aspect, right? Like, these two companies want to be known as sort of like trustworthy. And that's actually a giant part of Bitcoin, is that if you don't act justly in the system, then you're going to get burned, right? Like, no one's going to trust you. No one's going to think that, no one's going to give you business. And that's a major part of what you have to do. If you're sort of, and getting back to sort of the 2x scenario where, you have sort of the majority attacking the minority, I mean, that's a really giant step to take, and that will isolate you. That will give more sympathy to the minority. That'll probably push a lot of miners saying, hey, you know what? I didn't sign up for this. I did not sign up for anyone attacking. I'm going to go mine the other chain instead. Like, it has so many consequences that I don't think it's really a feasible or a realistic scenario of the word. And the only way I can think of that happening is if it was perceived that Core was attacking 2x first in some way, and then that would be sort of a reaction or a justification to do that. But I mean, just from a normal perspective, like any sort of attack, any sort of attack is going to be perceived as like a very negative action, and it will reflect very badly. So in order to do anything like that, it'll have to be anonymous. And if it's anonymous, everyone's going to sort of assume it's the biggest player. And they will have like this very bad reputation. So, I think the biggest player on the 2x side right now is going to be Bitmain, right? And everyone's going to assume it's Bitmain, even if it's not Bitmain. So, Bitmain in a way is sort of incentivized to make sure no one's attacking. So the minute someone starts attacking, they'll be like, knock it off. because we're going to be the ones that are blamed for this. So from a game theory perspective, I really can't see sort of like an attack on the minority chain as really that viable. It could happen, obviously, but it'll cause way too much sympathy, and I really I don't think that's like a realistic scenario. I mean, some other things that can happen, you know, just like some of them are frankly a little boring. You know, like most of the miners just stay with you know, Bitcoin Core, and in which case, you know, everything just proceeds as normal. 2x becomes sort of like an altcoin that very few people use or something like that. You know, another scenario, I guess, is where 2x just sort of doesn't happen at all. In which case, you know, just you know, Bitcoin moves on with SegWit and etc. You know, I think most of the interesting scenarios assume sort of like a, you know, rough split in hashing power. And, you know, at that point, it's just sort of like, well, what does 2x actually bring you? A lot of like, I don't know. There's certainly a lot of dumping of Bitfinex, and you know, I think we can expect some of that to continue at least. You know, other than Roger Ver, I haven't really heard of many people willing to sort of risk their Bitcoin Core coins post November 1st to get 2x coins. I mean, like, if you're gonna do that, like, wouldn't you go to Bitcoin Cash instead? I'm you know, like, just sort of logically speaking, it doesn't seem that viable, though. I don't know. Who knows? All right, so let me go back to the chat and let's see if there are any questions. If you, well, oh gosh, this chat is like super long. But I'm gonna go from the beginning. Let's take a look. I think SegWit 2x will actually pull it off. My current thing is that they probably will have a hard fork. Wallets will have to deal with it. It's stupid. Litecoin is a fork of Bitcoin, and there was no free money to give to anyone. Why is that? I guess that's not really a question. Here, let me hear. Running 2x software, hiding as core nodes. Well, so I believe 2x merged in something that like doesn't automatically disconnect the peer, or like sort of changes the user agent string so that it looks like Bitcoin Core, and that's to sort of like stop Bit from sort of banning it. But I mean, it's gonna happen anyway. The first block you send that's not valid on the other chain. So I'm not sure what they're trying to accomplish there. Really, the core developers were concerned with just sort of a node that's not only connected to 2x nodes and getting sort of false information and stalling out. I don't think even that's a big deal. Most nodes are connected to like 8 to 10 other peers, and the chances of them all being one side or the other, you know, and getting isolation attacked is fairly small, and you're not really going to transact right after the fork anyway. So it's a big threat. But then again, like, right, like they find low probability scenarios and protect against them. And you know, this is why it's such robust software. Let's see. Let's see what is all right. About the Bitcoin Gold pre-mine, it's going to be about 1% or 420,000 Bitcoin Gold tokens. I just want to go to the moon. Is that too much to ask? I do too. Let's see what's here. Korean pump coming. No idea. BTC, what to do before SegWit 2x? Or I will wait for SegWit 2x and get free money again. You will get a hard fork coin if they do hard fork. So there's that. My theory has been that Bitcoin is very anti-fragile, and if we survive a hard fork without replay protection, then that will cause the price to go up even higher, because the ecosystem will have sort of built-in immunity to that, and the next hard fork without replay protection will just sort of be brushed aside because everyone will have prepared for it. So in that way, I think 2x would be great for Bitcoin if it didn't have replay protection. I want to immunize against this now rather than 2 years from now. And not like, I don't know if 2x will succumb to the pressure that everyone is putting on them to add a strong replay protection, but if they succumb to that, then the next one might not. So I mean, I'd rather immunize against this earlier. All right, let's see. What's the next one? What are these questions? Not too many questions here. Could you explain the GigaBlock project and what testnet it was ran on? Yeah, so basically Bitcoin Unlimited, Peter Risen, I think is the main guy. He's actually going to present the scaling Bitcoin on the Gigabyte block. But basically they wanted to see how it would go with a 1 gigabyte block and see if it propagated fast enough, if it confirmed fast enough, and all this other stuff. And they're going to present the paper. I look forward to hearing about it. I don't know how it went, or I don't know which testnet it ran on. I presume it's not Bitcoin's testnet because it doesn't allow greater than, I think the max block size you can get with like pathological transactions is 4 based on SegWit. So it's probably not Bitcoin testnet. They probably did their own, so who knows? All right, Jimmy, do you trust the BTG devs? No. And generally, you shouldn't really be trusting the devs. You should be auditing your own code or having someone you trust audit the code. And if they've earned your trust, then great. Then you can continue trusting them. But new devs, I generally don't trust them. No. Let's see. What are your thoughts on Ethereum? I mean, I've had thoughts on Ethereum for years. I wrote articles back in like 2013, 2014. Yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical of the fact that they have like this giant dev subsidy or pre-mine or whatever you want to call it. I think it's at least an order of magnitude more complicated than Bitcoin, and thus has, at least an order of magnitude more attack surface. I think it's centralized because there's really one person kind of making all the decisions. But I mean, I don't know. It might be useful for something. I'll keep an open mind on that. But I haven't really seen anything other than it being used for ICOs. And more power to them for that. They've certainly found a niche in market. But we'll see if there's anything that's actually useful to society coming out of that. All right, let's see. All right. Do you agree that many holders are in wallets that are not safe enough and think they're all good going into the hard forks? Why is that? I think pretty much if you have any Bitcoin, your first question is when can I get when's it going to be safe after the 2x hard fork? So I mean, I don't think most people are sort of think that their wallets are safe at all. I think they're asking the right questions, and that's to be expected because you have a lot of money on the line, right? Like even if you have a small amount of Bitcoin, you're still concerned because it's your money. And this is something I tweeted, right? Like it's you don't need to worry about the hypothetical ignorant noob. There aren't like that many of them, and most people when it comes to their money are very, very careful. If you had like $20,000 in your pocket, you'd be very, very careful about where you placed it, what you did with it. I mean, I know there are stories of Floyd Mayweather sort of like losing track of where he kept his money, but that's because he's really, really rich and maybe slightly irresponsible. But, I mean, pretty much everyone else, if you have a significant amount of money, you're going to be very, very careful and you're going to make absolutely sure of everything. And that's the behavior we would expect. And that's what people should be doing. So, yeah, I mean, wallet devs will give the all clear on stuff and say, okay, it's safe to do X, Y, or Z. And maybe they'll post instructions or maybe even a video on how to do certain things, and that's when most people will actually act on whatever 2x decisions that they will make. But I by no means do I think like many people are like, oh, I'm all good, whatever. Unless they're holders and all they're not going to do anything with their 2x tokens. Yeah, I think people are very careful with their money. All right, let's see. Will B Gold cure baldness? No. Can you speak to the Bitcoin.com article of the benefits of Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin? I didn't even read it, honestly. I mean, they're saying Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. I mean, I guess to them it is, and it's true for them. I don't think it's true in general. Yeah, I don't think it's worth commenting on. It's more of a political issue, and it's certainly something that about. But at least for me, I don't really care. I really don't care. All right, let's see. Let's see here. Let's keep going. All right. What are your thoughts on Zcash? I think it's really cool tech. I think the math is amazing. I haven't looked too deeply into it, but obviously Zooko is a very good cryptographer, and he knows a lot about zero knowledge proofs and things like that. Is it viable as a currency or store value or medium of exchange or something like that? I think that's yet to be proven. But yeah, I mean, I'll keep watching it. It's one of the 3 altcoins that I pay attention to. Monero and Decred are the others. So we'll see. Let's see. Hardware wallets are an HSM. They're not, because you can still extract it from the key from the hardware, and it's not evident that it's been tampered with. And like FIPS 140-2 is actually a thing. Like there's an entity that certifies something to be FIPS level 2 or level 3 or whatever. So that's not true. Let's see. Does that mean you are locked out forever if your keys are destroyed? I guess this is in regards to HSMs. No, what you do is you back up your key in the safe, and you load it onto another HSM, and you're good again. That's the idea. Let's see. When Lightning activated, all fees going to be at 1 penny, and in the future, less Bitcoin will be created. Question: how many miners will be paid? They will shut down computer if money is not there. No, I mean, miners are still going to be paid. You still have to settle transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain, and those transactions absolutely have to go through. So, they'll get paid, and they'll probably get paid even more than now, depending on usage. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that's anything to worry about. They won't know. Hey Jimmy, does my Bitcoin need to be in the SegWit wallet in order to receive SegWit 2x coins? Yes, it does. So Trezor, for example, has I think they're calling all old stuff like legacy, and if you go to like Trezor.io and then search your Trezor and all that stuff, it only does SegWit 2x. I mean, not SegWit, it's 2x, but SegWit transactions, and that's sort of the default now. I imagine they'll be moving to Bech32 whenever it gets more popular. Let's see. Craig Wright is Satoshi. No, he's not. Those interested that are new to BTC are going to Google Bitcoin, and Bitcoin.com will come up. How will that affect the real Bitcoin? I mean, again, if you're making an investment decision, you're not going to just like look at one website and be done with it. You're hopefully going to look at a few things. And when they talk about Bitcoin to their friends or whatever, the first thing that people that actually know about Bitcoin will explain to them is, okay, there are 2 Bitcoins. There's Bitcoin 2x and Bitcoin Core, and here's the difference, and here's how much they're worth, and that's what you should know. That's like the first thing anyone's gonna tell them. So I don't think like a single Google link is gonna matter all that much. I mean, yeah, Bitcoin.com will come up, but you know, again, Google search algorithms are pretty smart, and the more people don't link to that, then you know, the more people will go elsewhere, right? Like it'll come up, but I mean, there's always sort of been misinformation or like contradicting information about Bitcoin, if you will. And you know, people find out the right thing because you know, there's sort of a social community around it. Again, like I said, the economic is probably overstated and the social is understated. There's a whole social aspect to Bitcoin, which I think most of you guys kind of instinctively know, right? Like there are certain people you listen to, there are certain people that you pay attention to, and stuff like that. Who is messaging me? All right, let me see here. Okay, somebody. Oh, Harish, thank you for your $5. Let's see, who drives the strategy for marketing Bitcoin? Nobody. It would be you, if anything. That's it. Yeah, that's it. All right, let's see here. Jimmy song equals God of War. I don't know. I don't know about that. Corey, remember when the fuzz dragged that? I don't. That's not really a question. All right, so Agatha is asking about her 50 Bitcoins that she spent as a fee. I actually kind of remember somebody doing that earlier this year, and the Bitcoin miner was actually looking for them. If you can sign a message and send it to them, I think you can just get it back. Yeah, I'll look for that post, Agartha. Just wait, and I'll help you out. Just you're chatting me on Slack and stuff. So yeah, don't worry too much. I will help you out after the show. Okay. All right. Question: aren't altcoins effectively just test nets for Bitcoin? I mean, a real testnet has no value. So I don't know. I mean, did they try out different features before Bitcoin? Sure. I mean, Litecoin's on that before. I guess in that sense, that's true. All right. Question: does Lightning change Bitcoin towards proof of stake? No, I don't see it that way. I mean, not really. I guess you're kind of staking coins if you're sort of like a middle node that's routing stuff, but I don't know. I don't expect there to be too many of those nodes eventually in the future. All right, Harish Prabhala asks, which wallet is safe and early to be able to sell Bitcoin 2x? I mean, if you want to be on there as quickly as possible, find an exchange that's going to that's announced support for 2x. So Bitfinex is one, and just leave your coins there. Yeah, obviously you take on some fiduciary risk or custody risk because they possess your Bitcoins. But I mean, that sort of worked out last time. But yeah, I mean, there are other exchanges that will announce the same thing. That's another way to do it. But yeah, I mean, we'll know a lot closer to November 18th, which wallets are going to support things and which wallets will not. So I'd wait until more announcements are made. All right, let's see here. 50 BTC, that is a lot of money. Yes, it is. All right. All right, so yeah, one thing I think I forgot to mention about Bitcoin Gold is that they're actually freezing the block from about a week from now, October 25th, and then they're going to build on it in November. So what you're going to do, what you're going to see is sort of like blocks that are no blocks found on the Bitcoin Gold chain for like a week or so, and then they'll start building on it later. At least that's the plan, or that's what they're telling me. And I think they're supposed to have a testnet pretty soon. So I don't know. We'll see. All right. Question: can you talk about the pros and cons of Decred? I mean, I just find their project interesting. Their developers are top notch. Yeah, I mean, you can go look up their proof of stake, proof of work system, and their voting or whatever. It's all on their website. How do you regard Grind/Mimblewimble? I think it's an amazing project. I'd love to see more come out of it, and I'd like to see a functional thing. The entire idea of cut-throughs and not needing a blockchain and just keeping essentially a UTXO set around all the time, and that's very appealing to me. And certainly the confidential aspect of being able to transfer money and you have no idea how much it is, that's really good. That's really cool, and I want to see more of that. But yeah, I would say those are the big things. So anyway, I think all right, I have a BTC paper wallet that still has Bcash. Will I lose 2x or Bcash if it's still on the wallet? No, you won't lose anything. Much like Casacious coins, you're just going to keep the value on the paper wallet, and I don't know, unless you have a particular reason to want to get rid of your 2x coins or your Bcash coins or whatever, I would just keep it on the paper wallet, and that's totally fine. Nice thing about Casacious coins is that they're worth more than the nominal value because of Bitcoin Cash, and it'll happen for Bitcoin Gold and Bitcoin 2x and probably like many other forks coming. I know this is the year of the ICO. I predict next year will be the year of the hard fork. Anyway, all right. Oh gosh, there's a couple more questions. All right, these are my last two questions. Please stop asking questions. What do you mean they're gonna freeze Bitcoin Gold chain and build on it? Do you mean pre-mine? Well, there is definitely going to be a pre-mine, but basically they want to freeze on October 25th, so people sort of have an idea of how much Bitcoin Gold that they have, because the distribution happens on that block. Basically, it's sort of think of it as an airdrop, but not really an airdrop. And they'll build on top of that. You can sort of like hard fork off of any block you want, and they're just choosing a block from October 25th, so they have something to work with. They could probably work out some kinks and testing and stuff like that during that week before they actually release the client and stuff. But yeah, that's sort of the idea. I mean, maybe they fast forward like some number of blocks so they can take a pre-mine or something like that, or take their dev subsidy that way. I don't know, but that's one other way that they can do it. And then the other question was, can you refer me to a good read regarding the basics? Yeah, Jameson Lopp holds Bitcoin Resources webpage. Lopp.net has Bitcoin resources, and that has like links to everything, like everything you can think of, and it has tons of them, and you can spend all day there and learn all about Bitcoin that way. But anyway, it was. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I've been on for more than an hour, so I'm gonna have to go and take care of some of the other stuff in my life. Gosh, there's so many things. But yeah, I want to encourage you guys once again to register if you are a developer or know a developer. Encourage them to attend Dev++ and Programming Blockchain, happening right before Scaling Bitcoin. Great conference, by the way. I'm so looking forward to it. You can sort of watch past videos from Scaling Bitcoin on the Scaling Bitcoin website to get an idea of what sort of stuff is there. All right, I got one more tip, so I have to answer this question. Could you clarify? Did you say that we need to have our BTC and SegWit addresses to get our fork 2x coins? No, you can have your BTC and anything on the normal chain, or on the chain before the 2x hard fork, and you will have coins on both. So if you have it in an address that starts with a 1, that's like a normal Bitcoin address, you will have it in both after the fork. If you have it in a 3 address that's multi-sig, you will have it in both. If it's a 3 address that's a SegWit address, you will have it in both. Doesn't matter. SegWit 2x, remember, also has SegWit. So that's sort of the key difference between that and Bitcoin Cash. Anyway, thank you guys. I want to encourage you to attend Dev++, Programming Blockchain if you have the time, and yeah, just continue to be vigilant over all this stuff. And yeah, I don't know if this was helpful for you guys, but if you want to see more Q&As like this, please give me a thumbs up and a share and a retweet on Twitter and all this other stuff, and encourage me, right? Like I'm still sort of exploring this show. This is only my 9th show. I'm not sure if guests are the right format or doing more sort of Q&A stuff regarding sort of the latest technical developments makes more sense. But, I mean, I'm open to you guys sort of suggesting things. So I would love to hear your feedback. Thank you very much. And this song is